March 3rd, 2017 marked an era of gaming where we saw Nintendo bounce back from the abyss. Prior to the date mentioned, the Wii U was a flop in terms of sales, the company was in a different position after the tragic passing of Satoru Iwata, and Nintendo needed to find ways to win back its audience. Enter the Nintendo Switch, which became the most versatile and successful hybrid console, doing things nobody expected it to do from a functionality standpoint. Eventually becoming the second highest selling console of all time, right behind Sony's PS2. And similarly having a huge library of games, both first party and third. But unlike the PS2, one of its own launch titles that also released on the Wii U,
The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild,
won Game of the Year. It was a revolutionary event in the company's history. With the announcement of the Switch 2, which despite me having a pre-order deposit secured at my local GameStop, I'm still uncertain as to whether or not I actually want to add this as a part of my collection. And it's mainly involved around the current direction that is leaving a level of uncertainty onto the fans with Nintendo's both pro-consumer and anti-consumer moves regarding this new beast. And before I dig deeper, this isn't going to be a video telling you whether or not you should buy the console or just be another obligatory boycott Nintendo kind of video. This video isn't going to be on the lines of any of that. This is my own personal principle on why, unlike the Switch era from 2017 to now, I'm not going to go too crazy with the games nor the accessories. And to tell you where I'm coming from as a gamer myself, having experienced the OLED for some time, as well as the V2, the V1, and the Switch Lite as well, prior to that. And also, disclaimer, I'm not a tech guy, so I apologize about my lack of knowledge in this field, so moving on. By and large has to deal with the fact that with the dead horse that's already been beaten about people bringing up the fact that the games are $80 rather than $60 in the case of most games. The only exception being Tears of the Kingdom being $70. But pretty similarly, this is going to be like a PS5 situation where despite the technological advancements with both the console and the games produced for the system, it's going to make that one spot in the game collection look pretty limited as it is. Not that it's a bad thing, but there's so much one could have for modern hardware in general that only one can actually budget how they can actually want to play their games in a certain way. And while it's a blessing that they're allowing backwards compatibility for the most part, if they didn't have that feature at all, there'd be an angry mob surrounding Shigeru Miyamoto's house. And even with the announcement of big games like Cyberpunk being on the 64GB cartridge, which I'm thankful for despite not having played the game yet, the game keycard, let's just call them game keys for short. And yes, I'm aware some of these games listed here won't be part of that package in the US. But the situation as a whole still feels similar to how the Switch handled some of its games released for the system where you needed to download a code for the full experience at best, or at worst, download data. And the same can also be implied for the PS4 and PS5. In my experience, the only 3 games that I currently have in my library that fall under a similar criteria are the Mega Man X collection, the Devil May Cry collection, and the BioShock trilogy, just to name a few. At first glance, it seems promising to have all that data be on a cartridge after first being announced for the system itself. But with those 3 packages amongst other games that got Switch releases with the same or similar treatment, that's unfortunately not the case. Which for BioShock is kind of understandable given how big, enhanced, and immersed those 3 games are, even for the PS3 and Xbox 360 era. Mega Man X and Devil May Cry, it's just, why Capcom? And in some ways, it almost feels as backwards as Star Wars Battlefront EA was for how backwards that game was. But unlike that piece of slop, you don't have to worry about overpriced DLC to have the full complete experience here. Though at the same time, it's not fair to make such a comparison in this context. This is DLC for the sake of greed and getting a full experience with little to nothing on the core game itself. This is more of an incomplete package without getting the proper contents. And I can also agree that it is tedious to download stuff in general, but luckily it's not that tedious if you're just going for a digital download, which who really uses that nowadays? No disrespect to digital players only, but just downloading in general, it's already tedious. Hell, even Final Fantasy VII Remake's download size, that's tedious in and of itself. Just like the franchise as a whole. Also calling it now, 7 Remake is gonna get the same keycard treatment here. Hard passive, true. Just like the franchise itself is a hard pass. So enter the game keys for the Switch 2, which is essentially a cartridge, but you have to download stuff to get that full experience for the system itself, and there's more data you have to have saved up for the console if you don't have an SD Express card as a backup use for storage. And with the system's 256 gigabytes of internal storage and downloading game key after game key, that's going to fill up faster than any normal physical cartridge requiring an update from its predecessor would. But the bigger kicker of all is you have to have the physical copy at all times, and you can't treat it like it's a digital game. So it's like buying a cartridge with nothing in it, downloading the data, and it's only playable by doing those two things. Why the fuck do we need to have those two things? You're better off buying the game digitally if you don't want to deal with this. I mean, even after being pleased with this game as a Sonic fan, I was hyped about Sonic Shadow Generations getting a launch day release with the console the day of when it was announced, only to find out the next day, oops, game key card. And to be honest, if I do decide to go for the full transaction for the Switch 2, I don't know if I want to buy it digitally here. Although, I'm still okay with sticking to my physical copies of the game on my PS5. Twice. Actually, 3 times if you're counting digitally on the PS5, but I'm getting off topic here. Another concern everyone has is that the battery life being somehow even worse than the V1 model, or even the Switch Lite. And while I can't confirm nor deny this regarding Anker batteries myself, I hope the Switch 2 is Anker battery friendly, cause this 20100 model has been my to-go battery for both USB-A and USB-C for years. Never had an issue with it no matter what I used. Never had an issue with my phone, nor even my OLED. But if all else fails, if I have to charge to play when the battery is low, I can choose to buy a spare adapter no matter what, and unfortunately, the OG adapter won't work on the Switch 2 because of the wattage power, unfortunately. So it just sounds appropriate in that sense. And also screen protector too, that's also mandatory. And finally, one thing I'm going to skip out on and vote with my wallet on are most of the accessories. Unfortunately, Shiny Hitler is responsible for this, but there are accessories that aren't that much of a need. Even if you're already loaded on Pro Controllers or Joy-Cons like I am, you're all Gucci as they're forwards compatible with the Switch 2. Is that even a term? Fuck it, we'll make it a term. And I also feel having that level of versatility with controllers in general is also a smart move in this case. Regarding the GameCube controller for NSO on the other hand, isn't a smart move as you can't use it on the base Switch. Yes, GameCube is only going to be accessible on NSO for the Switch 2 specifically. The GameCube controller is a revolutionary controller even to this day, and I'm also excited to see GameCube games come to NSO. But it's only for the Switch 2 and you can't use the controller on the old boy. Though on the plus side, it did get announced recently that you can use the controller outside of the service with a few caveats depending on what you play, but it still feels limiting with the type of system it can only be used for. But with all that out of the way, I just want to end the video with this. Like I said earlier in the beginning of the video, if you're not buying the Switch 2, that's okay. If you are, and if you pre-ordered it, that's okay too. But with the current direction of how things are going, I don't think this is going to be another Wii U situation given how successful the Switch was, and still is today. But all this feels like a gray era as we're already in an era where we have to vote with our wallets in this case. And hopefully as long as we use our voices as well as vote with our wallets, the environment will change. And I'm sure later down the road we'll get a V2 and OLED model with improvements for the battery life at least. But for the console itself, as it is so far, it's got its fair share of pros and cons like every console does. And just because there are cons in a console doesn't automatically make it a terrible console overall, even if it's not out yet. Though given Nintendo's history of not dropping game prices on shelves for 3+ years that aren't Black Friday related, I unfortunately don't see them doing that here, so Nintendo, all I'm asking is, don't fail us. You fascinated us with your history, but please listen to the consumers and their concerns. Love us, and we'll love you. Who am I kidding? They won't listen to us. That's all I got for today, but in the meantime, I'll see you guys next time. Dana.